My beloved child. Pause here for a moment, because what you are about to hear was never meant to pass you by. Something has already happened behind the scenes, something your eyes did not witness and your ears did not hear, yet your spirit may have felt it before this message ever reached you. The soulmate you love spoke about you to someone, and the words that left their lips carried more emotion than they intended to reveal. Do not move away from this moment. Do not dismiss the strange pull that brought you here. There is a reason your heart became quiet when you saw these words. Heaven is drawing back a curtain, not to frighten you, but to show you what has been hidden inside a conversation that changed something deeply within the person you love. You have wondered whether they still think about you when the world becomes silent. You have questioned whether your name still has power in their heart, or whether time, distance, confusion, and unspoken feelings have slowly erased what once felt undeniable. There have been moments when you told yourself to stop hoping. There have been nights when you tried to convince your own heart that silence meant absence, that hesitation meant indifference, and that their lack of action meant they had forgotten. But, my child, silence does not always mean a feeling has died. Sometimes silence is where the strongest feelings hide when a soul does not know how to carry them without trembling. The conversation began unexpectedly. Your soulmate did not plan to speak about you. They did not wake that day intending to reveal what had been kept guarded for so long. They were speaking with someone they trust, someone who has noticed the changes in them, someone who has watched their eyes drift away in the middle of ordinary moments. This person had seen the way your soulmate became distant when love was mentioned. They had noticed how certain songs caused them to go quiet, how certain places made them look toward the door as though expecting someone who never arrived, and how your name was avoided with such careful precision that the avoidance itself became an answer. Then the question came. It was simple, but it struck the hidden place. Why do you still act different whenever that person is mentioned? Your soulmate tried to laugh it away. They changed the subject. They offered a small answer designed to close the door before anything deeper could escape. But the person sitting across from them did not accept it. There was too much visible in your soulmate's face. There was a softness in their eyes that contradicted every casual word. There was a pause that lasted too long, a breath that became unsteady, and a silence that said more than any denial could have said. My beloved, this is where the conversation shifted. Your soulmate looked away, and for a moment, they were no longer in that room. Their mind returned to you. They remembered a moment you may not even realize mattered. Perhaps it was something small, the way you listened when they were struggling, the way your expression changed when you tried not to show that you were hurt, the way you remained gentle when you could have become cold. They remembered a time when you gave them understanding without demanding an explanation. They remembered the calm they felt around you before fear, timing, pride, or confusion entered between your hearts. Then they said something that surprised the person listening. They said, it was different with them. Not perfect. Not easy. Not without pain. Different. Those words were not spoken carelessly. They came from a place your soulmate has tried to silence for longer than you know. They have met other people. They have heard other voices. They have occupied their time, filled their schedule, and distracted their mind. But something about you remained unmatched. Something about your presence settled into a part of them that no one else has reached. They may have compared connections without admitting it. They may have tried to create new memories, only to discover that the feeling they were searching for still carried your shadow. Stay with this message, because that was only the beginning of what they confessed. The person listening asked, "Different how?" And suddenly your soulmate had nowhere to hide. There are questions that break open locked doors. There are moments when the soul becomes tired of pretending. Your soulmate could have ended the conversation. They could have offered another vague answer. They could have said it was nothing and walked away. But something within them needed to speak. The weight of what they had been holding had become too heavy. The truth had been circling inside them, searching for a way out, and in that moment, your name became the key. They spoke about the way you made them feel seen. This was not about being admired. It was deeper. Many people had looked at them, but you had noticed them. You saw the changes in their energy before they spoke. You recognized when their smile was real and when it was being used as a shield. You sensed when they needed space, yet you also knew when their silence was secretly asking not to be abandoned. You reached places in them that they had hidden even from themselves, and that frightened them more than they ever told you. Your soulmate admitted that being known by you felt beautiful, but it also felt dangerous to a heart that had learned to survive by remaining partially unseen. They wanted closeness, but when closeness arrived, it exposed every fear they had avoided. They wanted love, but when your love began to feel real, they realized that real love could also be lost. And instead of trusting what was growing, they allowed old wounds to whisper that something so meaningful could not remain. This is one of the truths you were never given. Their distance was not always a rejection of you. Sometimes it was a reaction to what you awakened in them. You may have taken their withdrawal personally. You may have believed you were too much or not enough. You may have replayed your conversations, searching for the exact moment you ruined something sacred. But your soulmate revealed that the problem was not that you failed to touch their heart. The problem was that you touched it so deeply that they lost control of the defenses they had spent years building. The person listening remained quiet. They sensed there was more. Then your soulmate spoke about your strength. They said you carried pain differently from most people. They said you did not always announce what you were going through, but they could feel that you had fought battles no one knew about. They remembered the times you tried to appear fine while your spirit was tired. They remembered moments when you supported others even though you needed support yourself. They remembered the dignity with which you carried disappointment, even when you deserved clearer answers and more honest love. My child, they noticed more than they ever admitted. The person you love has thought about the patience you gave them. They have thought about the chances you offered without using those chances to control them. They have remembered your kindness long after the moment passed. And although they may not have thanked you in the way your heart deserved, your goodness did not disappear into nothing. It followed them. It became a quiet standard against which other interactions were measured. Then your soulmate said, "I think I hurt someone who was genuinely trying to love me." The room became still. Those words carried regret. Not the shallow regret that comes from loneliness. Not the temporary sadness that arrives when someone misses attention. This regret came from recognition. Your soulmate has begun to understand that what you offered was not ordinary. They are beginning to see that you were not asking for perfection. You were asking for truth. You were not demanding that they become someone else. You were hoping they would become honest enough to meet you without masks. They admitted that they had misunderstood your heart. There were times when your soulmate thought your silence meant you no longer cared. They interpreted your emotional exhaustion as coldness. They believed your boundaries were punishment, when in truth those boundaries were the last way you knew to protect the love you still carried. You stepped back not because your feelings vanished, but because continuing in uncertainty was beginning to break something inside you. Yet your soulmate did not understand that at the time. They saw your distance and assumed you were moving on. They saw your strength and believed you no longer needed them. They watched you continue with your life and told themselves that perhaps they had never mattered as much as they hoped. But what they did not see were the private moments when your courage was simply grief wearing a steady face. The conversation revealed this misunderstanding. The person listening asked your soulmate, "Did you ever tell them what you were afraid of?" Your soulmate's answer was barely above a whisper, "No." That single word contained the weight of everything that might have been different. They never told you that they were afraid you would eventually discover someone better. They never told you they sometimes felt unworthy of the depth you offered. They never told you that your ability to love with sincerity exposed their own emotional uncertainty. They never told you they feared giving you their whole heart and then watching you leave with it. So instead, they became inconsistent. They held back when they wanted to come closer. They acted unaffected when they were deeply moved. They allowed pride to speak where vulnerability should have spoken. They waited for signs from you while ignoring the signs you had already given. And when the distance grew, they blamed timing, circumstances, confusion, anything except the fear that had quietly guided their choices. Do not let your heart race too far ahead, my child, because something even more important was said next. The person listening did not comfort your soulmate immediately. Instead, they asked a question that heaven had been pressing upon their spirit for some time. If they stood in front of you right now, what would you say? Your soulmate froze. In that instant, all imagined conversations became real. They pictured your face. They imagined hearing your voice after the silence. They wondered whether your eyes would still hold warmth for them or whether pain had finally closed the door. They imagined having only one chance to speak without pride, without delay, and without the protection of distance. Their first answer never made it out. They opened their mouth, but emotion stopped them. The person sitting with them waited. And then your soulmate said, "Would tell them I never stopped caring. I only stopped knowing how to show it." My beloved, allow those words to settle. They never stopped caring. This does not erase what happened. It does not excuse the confusion you endured. It does not mean every wound should be forgotten simply because hidden feelings still exist. Heaven is not revealing this so that you will abandon wisdom. It is being revealed so that you will stop blaming yourself for a story whose deepest chapters were written inside another person's fear. You were not invisible. You were not meaningless. You were not foolish for sensing that the connection carried something more than what was spoken aloud. But there is another layer. Your soulmate admitted that they had tried to convince themselves that time would weaken the bond. They believed that if they stayed busy enough, avoided your name, and refused to revisit certain memories, the feeling would eventually become distant. Yet the opposite happened. The more they tried not to think of you, the more your presence appeared in unexpected places. They heard words you once said through the voices of strangers. They passed locations connected to you and felt their chest tighten. They saw people with qualities that reminded them of you, yet the similarities only emphasized what was missing. They even experienced moments of happiness and instinctively wondered what it would have felt like to share those moments with you. Your absence did not become empty space, it became an echo. Then the person listening asked, "Why have you not reached out?" This question brought your soulmate face to face with the truth they had avoided. They were afraid of your answer. They were afraid you would not respond. They were afraid you would respond kindly but distantly. They were afraid that you had healed beyond them. They were afraid that someone else had entered the place they once occupied. Most of all, they were afraid that they had waited too long and that the opportunity they assumed would always remain had finally closed. Your soulmate confessed that they had nearly contacted you more than once. There were messages typed and erased. There were moments when their finger hovered over your name. There were nights when emotion became so strong that they almost abandoned every defense. They imagined saying, "I need to tell you something," but uncertainty pulled them back. They feared beginning a conversation they could not control. They feared hearing the pain in your voice. They feared being asked why they waited, because they did not have an answer that felt good enough. So the message remained unsent. But unsent words do not disappear, they gather. They become pressure within the heart. They visit dreams. They rise during quiet moments. They turn ordinary days into reminders of unfinished truth. Your soulmate has been carrying many such words, and the conversation you did not witness forced them to confront how much had been left unresolved. "My child," the person they spoke with then said something that shook them. They said, "You speak as though you have already lost them, but you are still making decisions from fear instead of truth." Your soulmate became silent again. Because those words were accurate. They had been mourning an ending they never had the courage to clarify. They had been imagining your rejection without giving you the dignity of choosing your own response. They had been telling themselves that reaching out would disturb your peace, while secretly knowing that part of them was using your peace as an excuse to protect themselves from vulnerability. This realization did not make them act immediately. But it broke something open. For the first time, your soulmate saw that waiting was also a decision. Silence was also a message. Doing nothing did not preserve the connection, it allowed uncertainty to define it. And the person listening made them understand that fear could eventually create the very loss they were trying to avoid. There was a long pause before your soulmate asked, "What if they no longer feel the same?" The answer they received was not what they expected. The person said, "Then at least you will finally be honest." But what if they have been waiting for honesty, not perfection? Those words entered deeply. Because your soulmate has believed they needed the perfect explanation, the perfect moment, the perfect proof that things would work before taking one sincere step. They have delayed truth because they were waiting to become fearless. But love does not always begin again with certainty. Sometimes it begins with trembling honesty. Sometimes the most sacred step is simply admitting what the heart has been unable to bury. Your soulmate began to speak more openly after that. They said they admired the way you loved, but they also feared they had damaged your ability to trust them. They wondered whether you would believe them if they finally became vulnerable. They wondered whether their words would sound too late. They wondered whether you had heard apologies before and whether another apology would mean anything without action. Then they said something the person listening had not expected. They said, "I do not want to return just because I miss them. I want to return only if I can love them better than I did before." This was the sentence that changed the energy of the entire conversation. Your soulmate is beginning to understand that longing alone is not transformation. Missing you is not enough. Thinking about you is not enough. Speaking beautifully about you is not enough. The connection cannot be restored through emotion without maturity, or through promises without consistency. Somewhere inside them, a deeper awakening has begun. They are realizing that if they come toward you again, they cannot bring the same patterns that created the distance. They spoke about needing to become more honest. They spoke about learning not to disappear when emotions become intense. They spoke about communicating before misunderstandings grow. They spoke about taking responsibility without turning every difficult conversation into a defense of their own pain. And although they did not say they had mastered these things, the fact that they could finally name them revealed that something within them is no longer asleep. But, my beloved, there is still something they have not yet admitted fully. Throughout the conversation, your soulmate kept returning to one particular moment between you. It may have been your last meaningful conversation. It may have been a goodbye that neither of you wanted to call a goodbye. It may have been an ordinary interaction that later became significant because so much remained unsaid. They remember the look in your eyes. They remember sensing that you were giving them one final opportunity to be real. They remember how your voice changed when you realized they were still hiding. And though they acted as if the moment passed without consequence, it followed them. They have replayed it. They have rewritten their answer in their mind. They have imagined what they should have said before pride and fear took control. Your soulmate told the person, "I knew they were asking me to choose, even though they never said the words. Choose courage over avoidance. Choose honesty over ambiguity. Choose the connection over the comfort of emotional distance." But your soulmate did not choose clearly then. And your heart experienced their hesitation as an answer. This is why the regret feels so deep now. They know you should not have had to interpret silence. They know love should not have forced you to become a detective searching for meaning in every delayed response, every changed tone, and every unfinished sentence. They know that your spirit became tired of carrying both sides of a connection that required two courageous hearts. The person listening asked, "Do you believe they still love you?" Your soulmate looked down, their answer came slowly. "I think a part of them does. But I also think I hurt that part." There was no pride in those words, only tenderness and sorrow. They understand that love can remain while trust becomes wounded. They understand that the presence of feeling does not automatically create safety. They understand that you may still care and yet refuse to return to the same uncertainty. This realization has forced them to think beyond what they want and consider what your heart would need. Then came the question that made their eyes fill with emotion: what do you love most about them? Your soulmate did not answer with your appearance, though they remember it. They did not speak first about chemistry, though the connection remained strong. They spoke about your heart. They said you carried light into places where they had become used to darkness. They said you made them want to become more truthful. They said your presence reminded them of the person they could be if they stopped allowing fear to lead. They said you